Tonight, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, the leader of the Conservative Party, and the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, face the voters. Welcome to Question Time. So over the next 90 minutes, the leaders of the two larger parties are going to be quizzed by our audience here in York. Now, this audience is made up like this. Just a third say they intend to vote Conservative next week. The same number say they're going to vote Labour, and the rest either support other parties or have yet to make up their minds. And as ever, you can comment on all of this from home, either on Twitter, our hashtag is BBCQT, we're also on Facebook as usual, and our text number is 83981. Push the red button on your remote to see what others are saying. And the leaders, this is important, don't know the questions that are going to be put to them tonight. So first, to face our audience, please welcome the leader of the Conservative Party, the Prime Minister, Theresa May. Good evening, Prime Minister. Your first question comes from Abigail Eatock, please.
Why should the public trust anything you say or any of your policies when you have a known track record of broken promises and backtracking during your time as Home Secretary and now Prime Minister?
Well, thank you, David, and thank you. Thank you, Abigail. And can I first of all say good evening to everybody, and thank you for you coming to be an audience at this programme tonight, which is an important part of the election campaign. Let me tell you about some of the things that I did as Home Secretary, Abigail. I said that I would ensure that we were dealing with extremist hate breaches, and I excluded more than any Home Secretary before me. I said I would do something about stop and search, because I don't think anybody should be stopped and searched on the streets of our country because of the colour of their skin. I said I would be tough on crime, and I said I would ensure our police and our security services had the powers they need to be able to do their job, and I gave them those in the legislation that I put through. And I made sure that we kept the records of criminals and terrorists on the DNA database, whereas Diane Abbott actually wants to wipe them clean. And I don't think that's a good idea, because that helps us catch criminals.
So no backtracking and no broken promises. What were you thinking of, Abigail?
Well, you have backtracked as Prime Minister. You backtracked when you became leader of the Conservatives and then immediately Prime Minister after the EU referendum. You said you wouldn't call an election, and you did. And then you were here calling an election and refusing to take part in debates, refusing to answer people's questions, refusing to talk to Jeremy Corbyn. And you've backtracked on your social care policy, and your entire manifesto has holes in it, and everyone else can see that.
Well, first of all, can I just say I'm not refusing to take part in debates, because I'm here answering questions from you, this audience, this evening. And that's what I think is important in an election campaign, is not politicians arguing amongst each other, but actually listening and taking questions from voters. And you mentioned about saying I wouldn't hold an election and now holding one. You're right, I thought we needed a period of stability when I became Prime Minister, but what became clear to me when we went through the Article 50 process to trigger the process of leaving the European Union, to respect the will of the British people, was that other parties wanted to frustrate those Brexit negotiations and wanted to frustrate that will of the people that had been expressed in the referendum vote. And, you know, it would have been easy. I could have said, OK, I'm Prime Minister, there's another couple of years going, why don't I just stay and hang on in the job? But I didn't do that. I've called an election because of Brexit. I was willing to do that because I think this is a really important moment for our country. We've got to get this right. If we get it right, I'm optimistic for the British people, because I believe in the British people, but we need to get it right.
Yes, the woman there.
Who is it that contested you? Because Labour have clearly issued a whip to get people to vote for Article 50 being passed, besides the Lib Dems, who have kind of said that they would like another referendum. I don't understand who it is that has contested your leadership through Brexit.
Well, you're right, we got the Article 50 legislation through Parliament. That was important. It's triggered the ability for us to start these negotiations. And those negotiations, by the way, start just 11 days after Election Day next week. So whoever comes in as Prime Minister, whoever comes in as a government has got to be ready to actually get the ball rolling and start those negotiations straight away. But it was clear through the discussions that we had around that time that the other parties did want to frustrate us. And you talk about the Liberal Democrats. I mean, we have a situation at the moment where if Jeremy Corbyn was to get into number 10, he'd be being propped up by the Liberal Democrats and the Scottish Nationalists. You'd have Diane Abbott, who can't add up, sitting around the cabinet table, John McDonnell, who's a Marxist, Nicola Sturgeon, who wants to break our country up, and Tim Farron, who wants to take us back into the EU, the direct opposite of what the British people want.
Thank you. That being said, Prime Minister, one of the things that I would like to know is, secretly, do you really regret calling this election now the polls have moved against you? I'm a Tory, and I pray and hope that we win, or that you win. But you must feel a little bit of remorse, no?
No, look, I've been in politics quite a long time, and as I've always said at every election, the only poll that matters is the one that takes place on polling day.
Yeah, thank you.
And I think the British people, when they're voting, everybody's casting your vote, people here and people watching and others, have a very simple choice, and it is about who do you trust to have that leadership to take us to get the best deal for Brexit, a Brexit deal in Europe, and who's got the will and the vision not just to take us through Brexit, not just to get on with the job of delivering Brexit, but to take us beyond and build a better future for this country.
Were you surprised, though, that the polls have gone from a lead of 20% when you called the election remorselessly down like that?
David, I'm never surprised at things that happen during election campaigns.
Well, you thought you were that popular and now you accept you're that popular.
I'm never surprised at things that happen during election campaigns, because the only poll I look at is the one that takes place on election day.
All right, you, sir.
Just face it, you called the election for your own political gains. It's nothing to do with good of the country. It's for your own political gains.
No, it's not, sir. Can I just say to you, as I've just said, it would have been the easiest thing in the world for me, having become Prime Minister after the referendum when David Cameron resigned, to say, you know, the next election's not till 2020. This is a good job. I enjoy doing this job. In this job, I do what I believe is the best for Britain. I could have stayed on doing that job for another couple of years and not called an election.
Your party called the European referendum for the good of the Conservative Party. You've called a general election for the good of the Conservative Party, and it's going to backfire on you.
No, I called a general election because I believe that the British people have a right to vote and to say who they want to see leading them through the Brexit negotiations. And I believe they should have a Prime Minister who has an absolutely resolute determination to respect their will. My party is the only party that is going to respect the will of the British people, get on with the job and deliver a successful Brexit.
Okay. We'll come on to Brexit in a moment. One more point from you.
I think it's a very different thing to debate a studio audience as in debating the other leaders. And I think there's been a lot of debating through the media. Would it not give a more interesting debate having you say these things face to face to the other leaders and speak that way about the policies rather than through TV and through journalists?
Well, I think election campaigns should be about getting out and about. Yes, answering questions from voters, meeting voters, talking to people across the UK in a whole variety of circumstances. And I'm afraid I think that of actually having that interaction with voters is more useful for the voter and for the politician. I think anybody who wants to be Prime Minister should be out and about, listening to what people are thinking. And I don't think 7 politicians just arguing amongst themselves is actually that interesting or that revealing.
OK, let's... We'll go on. I want to go on because we talked about the election. Let's go on to talking about Brexit, which you've mentioned once or twice. Barry Clark, could we have your question? Barry Clark, please.
Good evening.
Good evening.
If the EU start being awkward, why don't we just cut and run and pay no money at all?
Well, I've said that I think no deal would be better than a bad deal. Now, I'm confident we can get a good deal with the right plan for those negotiations, because I think a good deal is in our interests and in the interests of the rest of the EU. But we have to be prepared to stand up for Britain. We have to be prepared to go in there recognising that we're not willing to accept a bad deal.
What is a bad deal? People are very confused. You talk all the time about a bad deal which you won't accept. Can you explain what, in your mind, would be a bad deal?
Well, yes, I think, on the one hand, David, you've got politicians in Europe, some of whom are talking about punishing the UK for leaving the EU. I think what they want to see in terms of that punishment would be a bad deal. And secondly, you've got politicians here in the United Kingdom who seem to be willing to accept any deal, whatever it is, just for the sake of getting a deal. And I think the danger is they'd be accepting the worst possible deal at the highest possible price.
You said that there.
Good evening. You always say you want to serve for the whole people in Britain, but the Brexit was basically voted by 52%. So how do you actually serve for the whole country if just 52% backed the Brexit?
Well, the first thing I would say is that as I go around and talk to people, individuals, business representatives and others, I find that actually the greater majority of opinion here in the UK now is the decision was taken, the public were given their choice, they chose to leave the European Union. Let's just have a government that gets on with it and delivers a good deal. And how I would respond for all of those who voted to remain, and I voted to remain, is to say that now we must make sure we get the negotiations right, we get that good free trade agreement, the continued cooperation, a deep and special partnership with the EU, but that also we take this opportunity of Brexit, new trade deals around the rest of the world, actually seeing how we can build a more prosperous, stronger and fairer Britain. I think we can do that, and I think we can do that because I believe in Britain and I believe in the British people.
It's curious because just over a year ago, when you were a Remainer, and David Cameron got this wrong and he resigned, you got it wrong and remained to become Prime Minister, you said remaining inside the European Union makes us more prosperous. Yesterday you said Brexit makes us more prosperous. I mean, where are you at on this?
Yes, I set out very carefully before the referendum why I believed on balance we should stay in the EU. I also said the sky will not fall in if we leave the EU. What then happened was the British people, who had been given the choice, Parliament decided to say to the public, it's your choice. They chose that we should leave the EU.
But will we be less prosperous, going back to your old argument?
We've got to make sure that we can actually use the opportunities that come from Brexit. We've got to grasp those opportunities. But fundamentally, David, the thing I think that matters most in this is being willing to deliver on the will of the people. Not saying, oh, you got it wrong, let's have a second referendum, but saying you voted, you've chosen, you want a government that's going to do it for you. And I say to people, if you voted for Brexit, you need to make sure you get it with a government, with me and my team, who will actually deliver it for you.
Yeah, but the people made the wrong choice by your book, because you were a Remainer. They made the wrong choice because you were a Remainer. So in your mind, you must have thought, what are they on about? And then you said, they'll get richer if they stay, if they leave, they won't, they'll be poorer. Can you now honestly say there's no difference, we'll get richer by leaving, just the same as we would have done if we'd remained, which is what I wanted?
I said
or is there going to be a price to pay?
I did say at the time that I thought there were advantages on balance in being in the EU, but now what I believe we must do is deliver on the will of the people, but also make sure we make a success of it. So what I'm doing as Prime Minister is saying let's find those opportunities that will enable us to be more prosperous in the future.
All right, too much of me. The man over there, you, sir. And on the far side there, yes.
Good evening.
Evening. You don't need to say good evening all the time, because I think we've met.
It looks increasingly likely that we are going to have to pay a divorce bill, and it's speculated anything between nothing to 100 billion. Could you quantify in billions of pounds, a straightforward question, what is a good deal?
Well, I'm not going to give you a figure on that for two reasons. First of all, because we need to go through very carefully what, as part of the negotiation, what rights and obligations the United Kingdom has. And secondly, because if I gave you a figure here tonight for what I thought would be a good figure, that wouldn't be a very good negotiating stance when I'm sitting down if I'm Prime Minister in 11 days' time with the European Union.
But it is his money, or it's his money you're spending.
Yes, well, it's all our money that will be that is taxpayers' money, David. But you don't go into a negotiating stance saying the thing I want out of this is absolutely want out of this is X. Because then you can bet your bottom dollar the other side's going to try and make sure you don't get X.
And do you think you'll have to agree that before they'll talk about all the other things, trade and all the rest of it? Which way do you think it's going to run?
I've been very clear, as indeed has the EU, on recognising that we need to negotiate that new relationship with them, which will be about trade, but will be about other things too, so like cooperation on security and criminal justice. They want to start off by talking about the bill. I want one of the early discussions to be about the reciprocal arrangement for EU citizens and UK citizens. They haven't said that we can't negotiate the trade deal until we've agreed the bill. What they've said is we need to make sufficient progress. And what several of them have also said is we need to get onto the trade deal quickly.
The woman at the very back there.
Hello.
Hello.
You've said that you think you can negotiate a good deal, but do you really think that you actually have any real leverage with Brussels?
Well, yes, I do. And one of the reasons I think we can negotiate a good deal is because actually a good deal in trade terms is not just of benefit to the UK, it's of benefit to businesses in the remaining countries remaining in the European Union. So this isn't just about us. It's actually about a relationship that matters to them as well as it matters to us.
You over here on the right.
I'd just like to pull you up on the comment about Diane Abbott's miscalculations that you made a few minutes ago. Because Philip Hammond, who's the Chancellor of the Exchequer, got a 20 billion miscalculation a few weeks ago. So I think that's a bit rude.
Well, what I will say is this. As I said earlier on, Diane Abbott wants to be Home Secretary, and she wants to wipe the records of criminals and terrorists from the DNA database. That would mean we could catch fewer criminals and fewer terrorists.
OK, you, sir, here. The man in green.
Prime Minister, talk about Brexit and Remainers. I think the voting 52% to 48%, I think you'd lack the confidence in asking the public, the electors, to one more time, because the voting was so in the middle, what would the electors want to do? I think Nigel Farage made a big mess. I think Michael Gove led the electorate the wrong way. And Boris Johnson, they had buses pasted with NHS, 350 million. We were all told lies. So even people who voted out, perhaps they should be given the second chance. So you should have the confidence to say, shall we have another vote?
Look, can I just put it like this? Over the years in the European Union and its European Economic Community, there have been a number of occasions where referendums have been held in countries. There was one in Ireland, I think France's example as well, where they voted against what the EU was suggesting. And basically, the bureaucrats and the EU politicians turned round to those countries and said, you've got it wrong, have another vote, we want you to come up with what we think is the right answer.
But now we know how much it's going to cost.
Sorry, you can come back in a minute. At that time, I think collectively, people here in the UK said, you know what, that's not the way to behave. If the people have given their choice, let's listen to the people and actually deliver on it.
On the wrong information.
OK. A brief, one more. No, a brief, you, sir.
Very brief, the wrong information. They weren't given the right information to choose from.
OK, you, sir.
Earlier this week, Prime Minister, you said that you wanted the people of Britain to trust you with regards to Brexit and winning the election. How can the people trust you when your manifesto is not giving them any detail as to figures or what you propose to do with other things in government?
Well, what my manifesto... You're right, I used that word trust, and I used it because that is actually what politicians, when we go out, when we ask people to vote for us, we are asking people to trust us in the role that we want to be voted into. And if I look at our manifesto, what our manifesto has done is to be open with people about the great challenges that we believe that this country faces and that need to be addressed by whoever is in government. We've been open about that. I've also been open that there will be some hard choices to be made in addressing those various challenges. You talk about figures in our manifesto. Of course, we already have budgets that have been set out in the autumn statement as government and in the spring budget, and we've added some figures in various areas like our extra funding on the NHS and schools in the manifesto. But I think it's important that the next government sets out for people the really big issues that are going to have to be addressed by whoever is in government. And those are in our manifesto.
The one thing that was missing from your manifesto and seemed to cause a panic in the Conservative Party was the figures on what happens to people who have to fund their care in old age. And we have a question about it from Derek Griffin. Let's just have that. Mr. Griffin.
I'm just wondering, with regards to social care, you kind of spend your whole life, obviously, working hard to build up a nest egg and have a nice little pension and savings so you can be comfortable in your later life after you've retired. But if it's all going to be sort of taken away from you again, if your care is needed, then essentially why should you even bother in the first place?
And a reminder that your manifesto said £100,000 is all you'll be left with.
And the figure that you're left with at the moment is £23,000, so we're actually quadrupling that. But if I just
you're
look
sticking
at
with 100,000.
If I just look at...
I thought
Yes.
you'd changed that. I thought you were going to have an upper limit. That
The
people
100,000 is a floor, David.
Yes.
There's a cap and a floor.
Ah, but you didn't mention the cap in the manifesto.
Well, let me come on to that in a
but
minute.
you didn't mention the manifesto, that's the point.
I'll come on
when
to that.
When he's talking
but I'll
about the figures not being
I'll answer
there.
the question I was
Yes,
asked,
do
if I may.
do it your own
if
way.
we look at the... If we look at the situation at the moment, if you need care, then if you've got more than £23,000 in savings, you have to pay for that care. And if you need residential care, the value of your house will be taken into account. And so it's today that we see people sometimes having to sell their house in order to pay those bills. Now, what we say is that under the system we introduce, which is important because we need a sustainable system for the future, given the ageing population, if we do nothing, our social care system will collapse. We say that we will ensure that people are able to protect more of their savings, the £100,000, that they will also not have to sell their house during their lifetime to pay for their care bills. But I also wanted a system that was fair across the generations, and I believe this is too. We said in our manifesto we'd consult on the details. I heard the scaremongering that came out after our manifesto was published, and I set out one of the details, aspects that would have been in the consultation, and which is about having a cap on the absolute level. So there's a floor of 100,000, you can protect 100,000, and we'll consult on what should be the cap of the absolute cap on the level of care costs people have to pay.
Funny thing to leave out the cap, because it's rather important for people. £100,000 that you keep, but whether you get rid of £500,000 or 250,000 or that, the manifesto told you nothing, and then you suddenly said, oh, there'll be a cap, we won't charge you more than a certain amount. Odd to leave that out, wasn't it?
No, we set out the principles in our manifesto, which are the ones that I've just set out in the answer, which is, crucially, that it's fair across the generations, that we enable people to have the knowledge and the comfort of knowing they won't have to sell their house in their lifetime to pay for their care bills.
Barry Clark wants to come back on it. Go on.
Just wanted to double check, because obviously, I mean, just from a personal perspective, I mean, you're saying about the caps. I mean, myself and my wife, for instance, we are actually both disabled, so I guess statistically, as we get older, we are maybe more likely to be the ones that are needing to use that care. So are there any kind of safeguards or guarantees or something that, you know, we're not going to be left bankrupt in our retirement, basically, just purely because of, you know, a condition that we have no control over?
Yes. Well, what I want to... What I want to do in relation to the details of the policy, how it actually works, including the level of the cap, is to consult with people, consult with voters, also consult with organisations, charities and others, working with older people, so that we ensure that we get that right. And I think that's a fair way to do it, rather than just producing a figure now. I think it's important to have that consultation.
Yes, sir.
If you can tell us what the floor is now, why can't you tell us the cap?
Because Because we're talking about two different things, aren't we? On the floor, I think it's important that we give people the protection of their savings, which is greater than it is today. That's why we've set that figure at 100,000. But on the cap, as to where you set that figure as to the absolute figure that people pay, amount that people pay, I think it's right that we have that consultation. We will consult, as I've just said to Barry, with individuals, but also with organisations that deal with these issues, charities that work with older people, to make sure that we get that at the right level.
OK.
But
Victoria David, let's go on to another question.
79,000.
Oh, sorry, yes, you, quick.
We had a cap a couple of years ago for 79,000. Why can't we at least start with something around that figure?
Well, and we, in our manifesto, we said we weren't following the Dill-Knot. Those are the Andrew Dill-Knot proposals. We weren't going to follow those Andrew Dill-Knot proposals, and there were two reasons why. The first is that those tended to protect people who were wealthier, but didn't protect people who were on modest incomes. And secondly, it required payment out of taxation. And I actually think that if you're going to be fair across the generations, then we don't ask young people to be having their taxes increased in order to pay for the social care costs of people who may be sitting on a very significant value in their house.
Let's Victoria Davey.
Working as a nurse for 26 years, do the Tories expect our support in the light of another 1% pay increase?
What we're looking at in terms of the National Health Service and ensuring that we can provide the National Health Service in the future is, if we just look at how much money is now being spent on the NHS, in the 5 years to 2020, we will be spending £500 billion on the National Health Service. Now, we're putting more money in at the moment, and we will continue to put more money into the future, into the NHS. But it is important that we recognise, as you will know as a nurse, the demands on the NHS are increasing all the time. We recognise the work that the NHS staff do, but
nurses get paid less and less.
Nurses get an increase, and obviously there are some other payments as well.
We've had a real terms decrease of 14% since 2010. So don't tell us we're getting a pay rise.
Let the person sitting next to you say it, the nurse said.
I agree with that. My wage slips from 2009 reflect exactly what I'm earning today. So how can that be fair in light of the job that we actually do?
And I recognise the job that you do, but we have had to take we have had to take some hard choices across the public sector in relation to public sector pay restraint. We did that because of the decisions we had to take to bring public spending under control, because it wasn't under control under the last Labour government. And I'm being honest with you in terms of saying that we will put more money into the NHS, but there isn't a magic money tree that we can shake that suddenly provides for everything that people want.
You come in on this.
You say you'll cut, you cut in NHS spending, but you'll also cut tax for the rich.
No. We're not actually cutting NHS spending. We're putting, in fact, record levels of funding overall into the National Health Service, and we will continue to increase the funding for the National Health Service in government.
So we're funding it. Other countries spend way more on their health service than we do, but we're giving it out for free. So why are we spending less?
Well, it's not. I mean, the figures do vary, but actually it's not the case that all other countries are spending more money on their NHS than we are. We are putting more funding into the NHS. We're putting, and we will continue to do that. But I also want to do some other things in relation to the NHS. We have put into a requirement that mental health should be given parity of esteem with physical health in the NHS. I think more money is going into it, but there's more for us to do. And in our manifesto, we've set out a whole package of what we can do on mental health. It's not just about the money that's going into the NHS, which will increase. It's about ensuring that we're dealing and addressing the issues we need to. And I think mental health is something that's been put to one side for too long and not been given the attention it deserves.
Going back to the nurses, just for a moment, do you think it's fair that the nurses get just a 1% increase year in, year out, regardless of inflation, so they get poorer, so some of them, we're told, go to food banks? Is that fair? Do you sleep happy at that?
The public sector has been restrained in its pay to 1% increase. Of course, there will be those working within the NHS, nurses and others, who will get progression pay increases.
But are they not a special case compared with other public?
As their 1%.
Are they not a special case, nurses, compared with other people in the public sector?
People in the public sector across all sorts of services are working very hard on some jobs that we want them to do because they are about looking after us, about protecting us, about caring for us. But we have to look at public sector spending. We have to make sure that we're managing our money carefully, because at the end of the day, as I say, there isn't a magic money tree that suddenly delivers all the money that everybody wants for the spending everybody wants. You may hear later on that you can ask for anything that you want to have money spent on, but actually you can't. It's not there. We have to ensure we manage your money, taxpayers' money, carefully.
There are a lot of hands up, so I'll go to you, sir, first. And then...
You mentioned mental health there. I'm just wondering, does that include the work capability assessment in that with the mental health as well? Because I've just recently failed that assessment.
So have I.
Just through mental health.
There's a number of things we want to do.
And just you say your bit too. You're sitting together by chance? Or?
Yeah, by chance.
OK, well, say what you were going to say then. Go on.
Well, basically, again, on mental health, I agree. It's so important. The NHS is an absolute shambles for mental health at the moment. I applied for NHS counselling about, I think, probably the end of 2015. My first appointment is next Tuesday. Yes. My next appointment is next Tuesday. I've been waiting a year and a half for this, and I have suffered so much over that year, in part because of the work capability assessment. And let me tell you, I'm partially sighted as well. I'm partially sighted. I have mental health problems, and also I have other issues, so jaw issue. And I went into my assessment, and I was asked in detail about suicide attempts, and I came out crying because I was so upset because of the way I was treated by that nurse. And she came out after me. She'd forgotten to measure my eyesight. I'm partially sighted. She found time to just insult me, basically, by asking for all these upsetting details to the point I cried.
Let the Prime Minister answer.
Look, I'm not going to make any excuses for the experience that you've had. That's why I think it is so important that we do deal with mental health. Now, both of you have raised two different issues. One is how we deal with mental health issues in the health service, and the other is actually the work capability assessment. And this is something where we do look at improving how that assessment is taking place. But I know that the issue of mental health is particularly difficult one to address in terms of those work capability assessments. On the National Health Service and the other things we want to do with mental health, I mean, one of the things I want to do is ensure that there is better support in schools so that we have individual members of staff trained in schools who are able to better identify mental health problems and then know how to address them. And I was talking to a young woman only at the turn of the year who, in school, said nobody'd really known what to be able to do with her because of her mental health problems. And so she'd suffered as a result. If we can give people the support they need at an earlier stage, it's better for everybody.
Okay.
But as I say, I make no excuses for the experience that you had.
I want to... No, all right, the woman in orange there. I'm sorry, we've got to go on because we've only got 10 more minutes with the Prime Minister. Yes.
I think it's fair to say that mental health funding is one of your sound bites whenever people ask you about the NHS. But it really concerned me a couple of weeks ago. You were filmed when a lady challenged you about her benefits for learning difficulties. You turned around and gave an answer about mental health funding, and it really concerned me that the Prime Minister and potential future Prime Minister of the UK apparently doesn't understand the difference between a learning disability and a mental health condition. So I just need to have a comment on that.
In fact, when the lady first spoke to me, she talked about learning disabilities and mental health, and she'd actually raised mental health herself. But I recognise that the particular issue that she had was about learning disabilities. But look, both of these are areas where we need to ensure that we've got the ability for people's needs to be identified at as early a stage as possible, and then the support goes in. Obviously, all the evidence is the earlier you can get that support to somebody, the earlier you can identify an issue, then the better it is for that individual, but also the better it will be for them for the rest of their lives. That's why, on the mental health front, as I say, I'm so keen to ensure that we get more support in terms of training in schools. There are other things I want to do as well, but including in the workplace, actually, because too often that I think there is discrimination in relation to mental health in the workplace. So I'm going to bring in a new Mental Health Act, scrap the old Mental Health Act, but also change the equalities legislation so that discrimination on mental health will not be possible in the workplace.
Robert Waite, let's have your question. Robert Waite, please.
I will be voting Tory, but I'm not happy with the foreign aid budget, and especially why we're giving money to North Korea. Can you explain that, please?
Well, I think the commitment we've given on the foreign aid budget is an important one. And I think it's an important one for two reasons. First of all, we are one of we're the fastest growing, second fastest growing economy in the G7 last year. We are one of the most significant economies in the world. I think it's right that we say that we help those people who are less well off than we are in those developing countries. There are millions of children, millions of girls being educated today who would not be educated were it not for the foreign aid money that we're giving. But it's also about something else, because it means that in certain states it's possible to help to develop the economy, the governance of that state, and that is of benefit to us in protecting us as a United Kingdom for a whole range of reasons. If we can stabilise some certain countries, then that's going to be better for us, both in terms of security, for example. But we do look very carefully at individual countries and individual payments.
Yeah, but North Korea, that is one of the worst places going, surely.
Well, it's certainly not somewhere that I would suggest that is somewhere that one holds up as a paragon of virtue. I think what the DPRK, what North Korea has been doing in terms of its missiles and its nuclear situation, and we had another ballistic missile test only a few days ago. We're very clear that we want to see those changes in North Korea. I think it's important for China to be influencing those.
Does the aid budget go to North Korea? Does North Korea receive money from the aid budget from the UK?
Well, the gentleman has suggested that it is. I don't know the details of that.
It's about £4 million in 2015.
£4 million?
Yeah.
OK. You, sir, in the red and white checked shirt.
So you're the Prime Minister of the country and you don't know where that foreign aid is going to, whether it's going to the government or it's actually going to benefit its people.
Well, if we are putting money when we put money into countries, we change the way that we spend the foreign aid budget. In the past, foreign aid budget was all too often just given to governments. And you know the stories in the past of the way the money was then spent. So we work through NGOs. We work through organisations that are helping people. So money that we put into countries is targeted on things like education, on health, on welfare of people, on support for the people who are the most vulnerable.
OK. Brief one from you, sir.
You spoke earlier of foreign aid money. Can you explain why it is that a great deal more of our largesse that goes to the rest of the world is not in the form of British manufactures rather than of cash? It's much easier to avoid having a field hospital pocketed than it is a few million of cash. And it's also the case that if this money fed its way through British manufacturing and provided British jobs, there would be much less contention concerning the sums of money that are given away.
Can you answer briefly?
Well, yes. I mean, first of all, some of the money we're talking about is not about buying kit in the sense of things that will be manufactured here. As I've just said, if you're talking about education, it's about providing the facilities where children who would not otherwise be educated are being educated. But we do give support to countries in ways other than just the money. So there are some countries where we are, indeed our military are working on things like field hospitals and providing those directly. And if we want to improve British manufacturing and British manufacturing around the world, that's why I want to ensure we get good trade agreements around the whole of the world when we leave the European Union.
OK. Sally Jones, please. Sally Jones. Yeah, far away. There you are.
State schools are underfunded and teachers are overworked. Why are you putting money into grammar schools when state schools are beneficial to all abilities?
OK, why... just stick with the grammar schools issue.
Yes. Sally, what we're doing, the grammar schools will be within the state sector. They might be free schools, there might be other types of schools. We want a diversity of education, because education is so important. I want every youngster to get the best possible start in life, and that means every youngster getting the education that is right for them. We are actually putting more money. You said we're putting money into possibility for grammar schools to be set up. Yes, but we're also increasing the overall amount of money that goes into schools and ensuring there's a fairer distribution of that money across the country. But I believe it's important that, if we know that there are good schools out there, at the moment we have a law that says you can't set up any more of these types of schools despite the fact that they're good. I think that's wrong. I think we should allow those new grammar schools to be set up so we ensure every child gets the education that's right for them and the best possible start in life.
The one there. Yes.
In the school that I work in, by 2020, every single child in that school will receive £898 per year less than under a Labour government in 2020. My question to you is, why do you care less about the children than a Labour government?
I don't care less about the children. I don't.
Okay. Per child.
You're saying the per child, the per pupil spending has fallen.
Per annum. By 2020,
not the overall figure, but how much you get.
£898.
Okay, you made the point. Let the Prime
there are two things I want to do, because I do care about education. As I've just said in response to Sally, I think it is so important for every youngster to get the best start in life. That's why we will be putting more money overall into the schools. We'll be ensuring the pupil premium is there for those children who are disadvantaged. But we will also ensure that there is a fairer distribution of school funding, because at the moment, as you probably know, there are some schools that get twice the amount of money per pupil than other schools in other parts of the country. I want to see a fairer system of funding, and in doing that, we will make sure that no school sees a budget cut when that fairer funding is introduced. Okay. But getting a good quality education isn't just about the money going into schools. It's about ensuring that we're encouraging people to come into the teaching profession. So we're going to give student loan forgiveness to people who come into teaching and stay in teaching. It's about a diversity of types of school. So it's the innovation and creativity in education. So we're genuinely can say in this country that how far you go in life depends not on where you come from or who your parents are, but it depends on your talents and your abilities and your willingness to work hard.
Okay. We've got a couple of minutes left. Mandy Halder, let's have your question.
Why haven't you signed a letter to Donald Trump condemning his decision to pull out of the Paris Climate Change Agreement?
Something which the presidents of Germany and France and Italy have done.
Yes, and I haven't, because I actually have spoken to Donald Trump and told him that the UK believes in the Paris Agreement and that we didn't want the United States to leave the Paris Agreement. The G7 leaders sat round the table last week and spoke to and told Donald Trump that the six of us told him that we believed the Paris Agreement was an important international agreement on climate change, that we wanted the United States to stay in it. I've spoken to him. I spoke to him last night about this.
What did he say?
Canada and Japan haven't signed the letter either.
What did he say?
What did he say?
He says he's taken the decision because he thinks it's in the best interests of America. I say that the Paris Agreement actually is important for us globally in terms of dealing with climate change. That's why the UK supported it, and it's why the UK is continuing to support it.
You're negotiating our departure from the EU. Wouldn't it have been sensible and prudent to go along with France and Germany and Italy and sign a letter to Donald Trump instead of it being released that you just said you were disappointed by his decision?
It's not a question of whether or not we should go along with somebody else, David. We take independent decisions as the UK. I spoke to Donald Trump. I've told him my views from the UK's position last week. I told him last night what our views are. We remain committed to the Paris Agreement. We continue to think it's important for dealing with climate change internationally.
Well, that, I'm afraid, ends the first half of this programme. Prime Minister, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And now, would you please welcome the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn. Good evening, Mr Corbyn. Our first question to you comes from Kieran Hepworth, please.
Why should the British public trust you and your peers to negotiate Brexit?
Why should the British public trust you and your peers to negotiate Brexit?
Thank you for inviting me here tonight. I'm very sorry this is not a debate, this is a series of questions. I think it's a shame the Prime Minister hasn't taken part in the debate. We're very clear on Brexit. A referendum took place, a decision was reached, we're leaving the European Union. Secondly, we will immediately legislate in office to guarantee rights of EU nationals to remain in this country. Secondly, we will negotiate with the European Union to guarantee trade access to the European markets and protection of the conditions that we've achieved through EU membership, because it's crucial to protect our manufacturing industry. Your point about our negotiating team, we have a great team. We have a great team of very experienced people. Keir Starmer is one of the leading lawyers of this country. I think I can trust Keir Starmer with negotiations more than some other people who are undertaking those negotiations.
On Question Time last night, your International Trade Secretary Barry Gardiner said that Britain would absolutely was his word, be poorer after leaving the EU. Do you agree with that?
I don't think we necessarily would be poorer. I hope that we will retain, as I said, the trade access, and I hope also that we will have a Labour government that will be investing in a growing economy in this country and challenging the terrible levels of inequality that exist in this country at the same time. You, sir.
David Cameron went to the EU and asked for a few concessions. He got nothing because they knew that he would want to stay in the EU. If the EU understands your position that no deal is a bad deal, then you've got no chance.
I've made it very clear we accept the results of the referendum, and I think it's important to go from that point. I've made the point also about the need for trade access to the European Union, and there is, of course, an interest in that on both sides of the Channel. Most of our big manufacturing companies have supply chains here and in Europe, and vice versa. There is a mutual interest in this. But we're not approaching these negotiations by threatening Europe with setting up some kind of low-tax haven for big corporations in this country. We're instead saying we want to continue that trading relationship outside the European Union, but I think a sensible relationship with them is very important. And I will approach those negotiations to build up a trust which gives us that sensible relationship in the future.
What exactly do you think the British people meant who voted to leave, and what do you understand by leave the EU? What does it actually mean to you to leave the EU? What is it that matters in that?
Leaving the European Union means we withdraw from the Treaty of Rome, we withdraw from the 1972 decision that was made by the British government at that time to join with the European Union. It means that there is no longer a legislative authority over UK law within the EU or a parliamentary consent for it. It means we have to have an independent and separate relationship with the European Union, and I think we've got 2 years to negotiate it, and I can't wait to get started to make sure that we do retain manufacturing industry and service industry jobs in Britain that are so essential to our economy and our economic growth. But threatening will not work.
Is your aim to remain in the... Is your aim to remain in the single market? Do you think that's possible?
Our aim is to have a tariff-free trade access to Europe. I think we should put it in those terms rather than anything else at this stage.
OK, you, sir, over there, on the far side. No, the man over there. That's it, because he's spoken already.
Thank you. Will you rule out doing a deal with Nicola Sturgeon in the event of a hung parliament, because you will be negotiating, as you would expect, with the EU at that time?
We are fighting this election to win, and we're mounting a fantastic campaign in order to get that message across of how different our society and our politics could be. We are contesting all the constituencies. We are not looking to do deals with anybody. We are not forming a coalition government. I want to form a Labour government with a majority to carry out this amazing programme, which can give so much hope and opportunity to so many people.
Thank you. That was no deals. The answer I expected, but it wasn't the answer to my question.
Well, I thought your question was about deals, and I said no deals.
OK, I'm going to go to somebody else. You, sir, there, in the blue shirt.
Given the absence of the European Court of Justice, how will you uphold government accountability post-Brexit? On environmental issues, for example, air pollution, we're already breaching limits. The European Court of Justice holds us to account. What will happen when we leave the EU?
I want to ensure that the environmental protocols are adopted into UK law. I think it's very important to do that. It's also absolutely crucial for the future of all of us that we have agreements with all of Europe, be they part of the EU or not, on air pollution, on air quality, on sea pollution and protection of our seas and our natural environment, and I'm very determined to achieve that. And since you raised the subject, I utterly deplore Donald Trump's decision to withdraw from the Paris climate change. I would sign a letter with any other leader that would deplore that straight
away. Let's come home for a moment. Steve Rudd, let's have your question, please.
Yes,
Steve Rudd.
Hi, Steve. Good evening. Yes, I run a small local business. I'm faced with the possibility of higher corporation tax rates. Obviously, we've alluded to the uncertainty that Brexit's going to create over the next couple of years. Today, you've talked about creating jobs. I just wonder how I can have confidence that those jobs, well, I as a small business can create those jobs.
Well, I don't know how big your small business is.
It's a micro business. It's a small financial service business.
Is this big, that big?
I employ 5 people. It's a small business, but it could grow.
Good. Let's hope it does
grow. It can't grow in uncertain times. That's the problem.
Absolutely.
Just specify again, what are your problems with the proposals that Labour's making?
Well, obviously, it's the rising corporation tax, it's the uncertainty of Brexit and the outcome from Brexit. It's planning ahead, basically, my problem is.
OK.
And then, obviously, we've got the personal taxation issues that, create other issues that further down the line.
I'm sure you recognise there are huge problems in the funding of our public services, health, education, and these have to be addressed and dealt with. We have a fully costed and fully funded manifesto here, and that will cost, yes, and we will raise corporation tax up to 26p by the end of the Parliament. And that will be actually 2% lower than it was in 2010 and will actually be less than the G7 average. What it will also do is not raise corporation tax for small and medium businesses by that amount. Some will have no rise whatsoever. And we have had very interesting and very good discussions with a lot of small businesses about their problems of accessing capital, their problems of growing because banks don't like them and are not interested in them, and the need to have an investment strategy for this country. So on top of that, we will also be forming a national investment bank to improve infrastructure all across the country and develop new high technology industries, which I think are the future of this country. Unharness or let the people with the skills actually develop the jobs and develop the industries in this country. And so, yes, we are asking the very biggest corporations to pay a bit more. But I tell you what, I think it's worth it. It's worth it so that any young person can go to university and not leave with debt. It's worth it to make sure school head teachers don't have to collect at the school gate in order to pay the teachers' salaries. I think it's worth it for a better society in which everyone can achieve something. OK. Jack Rise, please.
To come back to you, I'm also working, well, I'm linked to an accountancy firm, so we obviously deal with larger businesses as well as potential clients and as existing clients. My choice, basically, what choice of my clients is a Conservative government and a Labour government, and the difference, as you say, 2%, we're looking at on a European-wide, but it's a 9% difference between what the Conservatives are proposing for corporation tax for larger businesses and what the Labour government is proposing.
It's a fair question, but I would simply say this. All of your clients, I'm sure, require workers at various times. They require skilled workers at various times. If we, as a society, don't look at the problems throughout our school and education system and invest in it properly, where are the skilled workers going to come from tomorrow? Where are going to be the consumers of tomorrow? I think it's time that we looked at inequality in our society and used our public investment in order to improve services and give real chances to everybody. Poverty is a waste. People who can't get the education they want and the qualifications they want, we all lose. It's a question of whether the community gets together to support everybody, or we just let the rich get richer and the rest suffer.
What's the overall increase in the tax take that Labour, if it comes to power, would expect? What kind of percentage on the current tax take?
48 billion more.
What percent is that of what comes in at the moment?
48 billion more, which is quite a small proportion of the total. The point I'm making is that what we've got here is funding of it through corporation tax, funding of it through some new taxes. 95% of the people of this country will pay no more in tax, VAT or national insurance.
But the
others will be asked to pay a bit more, and I think it's the right thing to do because it does give us a growing economy.
The figures for the country as a whole, for the economy as a whole, is it's very nearly a 10% increase in tax take by the government. It brings me to a question from Jack Rouse, if I may. Jack Rouse, please. Where is Jack Rouse? Yes, speak away, speak away.
Hi, Jack.
Is Labour's manifesto a realistic wish list, or is it just a letter to Santa Claus?
I urge you to read it. I think it is a serious and realistic document that addresses the issues that many people in this country face. And we've been brave enough to put it out there with all the policies that are in it. How we deal with the school funding crisis, how we make sure preschool, all children, 2 to 4, get 30 hours childcare per week or opportunities for preschool play and education, how we bring back the educational maintenance allowance so that youngsters who would be deterred from staying on at school or going on to get A-levels or other qualifications, and that those who can get into university won't end up with debts of 50 or 60,000 at the end of it. This is nothing unusual in many other countries in the world. I think it's time for us to invest in our future. The other crisis I may mention, David, is the question of health, the question of mental health, and the question of social care. If we don't address it, what happens? What happens is more people suffer. What happens is more women usually give up work to care for those who cannot be cared for because we're not putting enough money into it. And those with a mental health crisis suffer alone and don't get the help and support that they want. We have to respect the needs of people and, frankly, challenge all of us to say, if we want to live in a society that genuinely cares for all, we've got to be prepared to deal with issues of inequality and pay for it. And I'm prepared to do that.
Okay.
It's a question of funding it. And I'm thinking of last time Labour were in government, they left a note at the Chancellor's office saying, we've no money left.
What I would say is, for the past 7 years of austerity, that austerity has hit public sector workers with a 1% cap. It has hit all our schools and public services. It has caused a housing crisis. And you know what? The very richest in our society have got richer. There's been more and more tax giveaways at the top end and more charges at the other end. It's time to rebalance it. Our manifesto is a serious, well-thought-out document that I believe is getting a lot of support, and people are very excited by the idea of how we could do things differently.
The woman here in the third row.
Say this manifesto is serious and well thought out, and you speak about creating an equal society free from racism and anti-Semitism. But how can I believe a word of this when you, as party leader, have failed to expel one of your own members, Ken Livingstone, for his anti-Semitic remarks?
There is no place for anti-Semitism anywhere in our society, and certainly not in our party. Members have been suspended if they've committed any remarks
But he's
that
not
can
being-
be seen
he's
to
not
be
being held to-
can be seen to be of an anti-Semitic nature. Those that have done that are suspended. We have a process that is independent of me within the party, which investigates these and makes a decision on it. I deplore racism in any form whatsoever. The way in which the Jewish people have suffered down the centuries, the Holocaust and all that went with it, was the most appalling stain in the history of mankind. And I believe we have to fight racism in any form with every fibre of our being. A society that cannot challenge racism is a society that is heading for division. I will not tolerate it in our party or anywhere else. Can you come back on that?
If it's something that's so important to you, how are you sufficed with only suspending him for a short period of time? How is it not enough to expel him
He has
permanently?
been suspended, and further investigations may or may not happen after the election, but he is suspended from membership. But he's suspended so that the investigation can take place.
All right, the woman there on the gangway, you. Yes, you?
Oh, I heard you recently commented that black and ethnic minorities' potential has been, locked under Conservatives, and you plan to kind of free up and unlock it. So I just wanted some clarification as to how exactly you plan to do it.
Sorry, I didn't fully hear the question. There was a camera right in front of you at the time. Sorry about that.
I said there was a recent comment that I read in the news about you purporting that black and ethnic minorities' potential has been locked under Conservatives. So I just want some clarification as to how you'd free it up or unlock it or help in that regard.
The issues are of poverty in Britain. The issues are of differential levels of spending in inner city areas compared to other areas. And there are serious issues about the number of young black people, particularly young men, who are part of the criminal justice system, end up in youth custody or youth justice institutions, or those that end up in mental health institutions. I think we have to look very seriously at levels of racism within our society, if you like, racism that's almost of an institutionalised nature. That has to be looked at. And one of the issues we put forward was consider how difficult it can be for somebody with an African name or a Muslim name to get a shortlist or get an interview for a job compared to others. And so one suggestion, it may become a policy, is that we should have blind applications for jobs where there's no name involved, there's merely a description of your skills and your ability and your qualifications, so that there can be a fair assessment of that person. Because we are a multi-ethnic, multilingual, multicultural society. If it doesn't treat everybody equally and give everybody a decent chance, then we end up with poverty, we end up with discrimination, and we end up with divisions. I want to see a country that comes together and is not divided and apart by poverty or by discrimination.
Okay. We may come back to education and the economy in a moment, but let's have this question from Adam Murgatroyd, please. Adam Murgatroyd.
If Britain were under imminent threat from nuclear weapons, how would you react?
I would do everything I can to ensure that any threat is actually dealt with earlier on by negotiations and by talks, so that we do adhere to our obligations under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, that we do encourage China in its work in trying to bring about six-party talks in resolving the issue in North Korea, and we do follow the lead that President Obama took in doing a deal with Iran, which would result in them not developing the nuclear capability. I think the idea of anyone ever using a nuclear weapon anywhere in the world is utterly appalling and terrible. It would result in the destruction of the lives and communities and environment for millions of people. And so I would be actively engaged to ensure that danger didn't come about. I would also be very aware of other dangers that we face. Cyber attacks hit our National Health Service a couple of weeks ago. The dreadful terrorist attack in Manchester indicates the danger of individual acts of terrorism that can take lives. We have to be secure here. We have to protect our society and our country, but we also have to engage in the rest of the world to make sure we don't have huge ungoverned spaces such as in Libya, which can become the basis of some terrible events that are going to take the lives of many other people. We have to deal with those issues here and globally. That is the function of a responsible government.
Your party is committed to renewing Trident. Are you saying there are no circumstances in which you'd use a nuclear weapon?
I'm saying that our party has committed to renewing Trident. That was a decision taken by a party conference and indeed taken by Parliament. I would view the idea of having to use a nuclear weapon as something that was resulting in a failure in the whole world's diplomatic system. There has to be no first use. There has to be a process of engagement to bring about, ultimately, global nuclear disarmament. It's not going to happen quickly, it's not going to happen easily, but we have to have that wish. You cannot countenance a world in which we could all be destroyed by nuclear war.
You say no first use, and you wouldn't push the button in a first use. In retaliatory use, would you use nuclear weapons that your party is...
The weapon is there, and
reviving?
I would say no first use of the weapon, and I think that has to be the basis on what we do.
Adam, does that answer your question? Do you want to come back on it?
I find it incredibly concerning that you wouldn't ever commit to doing that. It's our safety that we need to look out first and foremost in your government. But what particularly annoys me is that Trident isn't just for, heaven forbid, a potential Corbyn government. It goes long beyond that, you know, many, many decades into the future. So when you're making the decision whether to support this or not, it's not just for right here, right now. It's threats that we can face in the future.
Fair point, but we have to do everything we can, obviously to protect ourselves, but the best protection is having good and reasonable relationships with the rest of the world so we don't descend into a mentality where there are military blocs threatening each other. And I'm utterly determined to do everything I can to bring about a more peaceful world. I've spent a lot of my life with UN and other organisations trying to bring about principle of no first use, principles of disarmament, and principles of bringing about peace around the world. That surely is something we can all work for. I think we have to recognise that there is deep inequality and injustice in the world, but the threats are, as I said, cybersecurity and terrorism. The other threats are actually of environmental disaster around the world and large numbers of people fleeing from environmental disaster, in effect, environmental refugees, which is why I was so disappointed in President Trump's decision, particularly in view of what had been achieved by people working together to try and protect and sustain this planet. We've only got one planet. Let's get together when we live on it, and above all, let's not destroy it.
Can we just come... Can we just come back to the nuclear issue? You are Prime Minister. You've said you would have no first use. You wouldn't countenance Britain's nuclear deterrent, which your party is restoring, rebuilding, maintaining. You wouldn't have a first use. And it raises the question, he said, under direct attack, would you use it in retaliation? As Prime Minister, you're speaking to the country about what you would do with the most expensive defence weapon that we have. Are you saying you would never use it under any circumstance?
People tell me the most effective use of it is not to use it because it's there.
Sorry, you're dodging the question, aren't you? I'm saying, are you saying there are no circumstances under which you'd use it?
Any circumstances where anyone's prepared to use a nuclear weapon is disastrous for the whole planet. That is why there has to be a policy of disarmament and globally, but through a multilateral policy, not a unilateral policy.
But that's the ideal. But what about the reality, where you're faced with the prospect that you may have to use it? I'm just asking for a simple answer.
The reality is that we have to, obviously, try to protect ourselves. We would not use it as first use, and if we did use it, millions are going to die. You have to think this thing through. I'll decide on the circumstances at the time.
All right, no, you said that you
would you use it as second use? Or would you allow North Korea or some idiot in Iran to bomb us and then say, oh, we better start talking? You'd be too late.
No, of course not.
You're going to have to do it first, mate.
No, of course not. Of course I would not do that.
You would allow them to do it?
Of course not. Because
Well, would you stop them?
that is why I made the point a short time ago about the need for President Obama's agreement with Iran to be upheld. It's quite important, actually, and also to promote disarmament in Korea. That is difficult, I appreciate, but...
Impossible.
Well...
Impossible.
All right,
ask the Chinese what they're trying to do.
You up there.
Yeah, you're asking a massive wish when you've got one of the biggest arsenals by your side. I'd rather have it and not use it than not have it at all, especially in today's day and age.
Do you want to comment on that? All right. Anybody? The woman there. Yes. Let's just stick with this, then we'll move on. Yes.
I actually have a question regarding human rights, but...
All right. Use your question.
Just before, I don't understand why everyone in this room seems so keen on killing millions of people with a nuclear bomb. On from that particular debate because we are talking about murdering people. I want to ask a specific question about your immigration policy. You've mentioned that you want to reunite families, specifically that have been forced apart by Theresa May's current migration policies. Myself, my husband's recording this in America as he's at work. He was deported in December. He was told he was too highly educated, despite studying here, getting an undergraduate and a master's degree, invested a lot in this country. I want to know whether you would consider reducing the financial threshold for family migration to be further in line with the national minimum wage or living wage.
Yes, our manifesto has addressed this issue. It is very painful, some of the decisions that are made where the, frankly, arbitrary level of income is chosen. Couples are split apart, families are split apart, and people like the person you're talking about who've invested a huge amount of time and energy into this country are then removed from this country. Who loses? We all lose. The family loses, the children lose, we lose as a society. And we will change those immigration laws so that there can be proper family reunion. I think that has to be the right and sensible thing to do.
Are you in favour of reducing immigration overall into this country?
What I think will happen is this, that we have managed migration from outside Europe, which is based on family reunion and skill needs or investment. We have at the moment free movement from within the European Union. That ends when we leave the European Union. So we'll then have to be managed migration from Europe. We have to also recognise that those who have migrated to this country have made a massive contribution to our society. The health of all of us depends on the work that's done by many people that made their homes here. What I think will happen is there will probably be some reduction in European migration because we will also prevent there being recruitment of groups of low-paid workers from Central Europe to come here to undermine existing conditions that are often not very good themselves and damage the life chance of people in this country and be not actually very good for those that have been brought in. So we will end overseas-only recruitment and end those contractual arrangements by which people are brought in, particularly into the construction industry. But we also, if I may say so, yes, just have another issue which we do have to address, and that is the skill shortage and skill problem in Britain, because we have not invested enough in industrial training, we've not invested enough in skill training, we've not invested enough in training more doctors or more nurses in this country. Until we do that, then we've got a big problem. And so our whole approach to our manifesto is about investment for the future. I'm
thinking of what your Brexit Secretary, or Shadow Brexit Secretary, I should say, Keir Starmer said, which is there's been a huge amount of immigration over the last 10 years. People are understandably concerned about it. I think it should be reduced. When people voted Brexit, do you think immigration was at the forefront of their minds?
I think it was a big factor in it. I don't think it was the only factor, but it was a big factor. There is also an issue that communities and local government are often not sufficiently funded to deal with groups of people coming in, and so we would restore what Gordon Brown had in 2009, which was a Migrant Impact Fund.
One or two more people. I'll come to you and then we'll go on to another question. Can we get a microphone to you? Yes. Go on, far away.
Mr Corbyn, we've talked about nuclear weapons before, but one thing that worries me more at the moment, as somebody who's grown up in a family business, is the changes in the minimum wage. I read your manifesto yesterday, and you are planning on increasing the minimum wage to £10. Now, the current plan for the national living wage forecasts say that up to 60,000 people could lose their jobs because of those increases in wages. So, firstly, how many jobs, what statistic have you been given by your economists or whoever works for you as to how many jobs will be lost if it goes up to £10 an hour? And secondly, how will you help the 3 million micro businesses in the United Kingdom who employ many people on the minimum wage and already struggle to do that?
Fair point and fair question. When the minimum wage was first introduced by the Labour government after the 1997 election, there were a lot of similar concerns and predictions which turned out not to be the case, and in fact there was not any substantial number of job losses.
Mr. Corbyn, the reason that happened is because the wage increases were so small. If you look at the economic comments around that time, the wage increases were so small. All the commentators said that. This is a massive wage change. There is such a bigger margin of error now in your policies than what was brought in 1999.
Can I come back to your point? What we're proposing is £10 an hour by 2020. That would be a living wage. That would reduce our Department of Work and Pensions bill somewhat, because you'd be reducing in-work benefit payments because people are being paid more. There are many big companies that could well afford to pay it and shouldn't be just paying the minimum. There are companies like, I suspect, yours, small companies that would have problems. We fully recognise that. We would therefore work with them, either to give them tax relief or support in order to make sure the living wage, the real living wage, was paid, but they didn't close down as a result of it. Because as a society, we have 6 million people earning less than the living wage. We have 1 million people on 0 hours contracts. We have wage levels as a proportion of national income actually falling at the present time. I think more money in the pockets will mean people are better off, but it will also be an economic boost itself. I absolutely recognise the problems for small and micro businesses. That's why there would be a pathway to it for them with support from the government to achieve it.
Okay. Edward, I'll come to those. I just want to hear from Edward Robbins, because Mr. Corbyn just mentioned the issue. Edward Robbins. Where is Edward Robbins? Put your hand up. Where are you? There. Yes, good.
0 hours contracts provide an easy way for students like myself to get casual, flexible work. How will scrapping these contracts affect us?
Labour policy to scrap 0 hours contract.
First of all, 0 hours contracts for many people mean a lifetime of stress and a lifetime of great difficulty. Imagine what it's like if it's your sole source of income is a 0 hours contract job. You wake up in the morning, you look at your mobile phone and see if your employer wants you that day or not, that week or not. You don't know what your income's going to be. Now, I do understand the point about students and others. Some companies, some employers say, OK, we need people in a bar, in a shop, in a packaging place, those kind of enterprises. We will pay you X number of hours per week on a flexible basis so that you will have an average pay of, say, 10 hours per week. That means those people are loyal to the company, those people know what their income is going to be, and that seems to me a much fairer way of doing it, so they then have some security of what's going on. And there are some employers that do that in towns with a large student population, with students, and it works quite well. What's your reaction?
Well,
I'm not going to stop you working, it's OK.
Well, yeah, I was talking about more coming from us having the option for students and us to go to employers and say, we want to work this time, and not just getting told you're working this many hours this
working
week.
When you choose,
yes.
Really.
Yeah,
well,
yeah, the so-called gig economy, like riding for delivery services.
Yes, I think the agreement should be that you come to a discussion with the employer. I can work for 3 hours on a Monday, 6 hours on a Thursday, 2 hours at a weekend, something like that. And that's my work pattern. It's not simple to manage for any employer. I fully understand that. But it does give the security to the individual. It also gives the employer a wide range of workers that are working and will be loyal to that employer.
All right, you said the back there.
Why have you never regarded the IRA as terrorists?
I have deplored all acts of terrorism by anybody in Northern Ireland or anywhere else, and I think the Good Friday Agreement was a huge achievement that was brought about when both communities recognised their shared but different past and brought about the idea of a power-sharing government in Northern Ireland. And I think that was an enormous achievement, and it's been copied elsewhere in the world as a way forward. I don't approve of any terrorism of any sort or any terrorist acts of any sort. It only divides communities and kills people.
They killed a lot of people.
Does that answer the question for you?
They did kill a lot of people, didn't they?
All deaths are wrong. All killing is wrong. We have to develop, and we did in Northern Ireland eventually, a very effective peace process, and I think we should pay tribute to those in the unionist community as well as those in the nationalist community for coming together to bring about that peace process. It was a truly remarkable experience.
Okay. You, sir? Yes. You didn't want to speak?
Me?
Yeah, I thought you had your hand up.
You've got the microphone over your head, you're all right.
Well, you said you didn't support the IRA. You've also supported Hamas and other terrorist organisations. How do you expect the British people to vote for you to go into number 10 when you sat there and supported them? We've seen you.
I have not supported any of those organisations. What I've said is, and I'm sure you would probably agree with it, that if you're to bring about a peace process anywhere, be it in the Middle East, be it in Ireland, be it in a different situation in, say, Colombia or anywhere else, there has to be a coming together at some point.
You were talking to them when they was killing our people, their women and children. You were talking to them.
There has to be. Well, I was talking to representatives of the Republican movement. Yes, actually, so was the government at the same time. Ian Paisley was indeed thrown out of Parliament when he told the government, told Margaret Thatcher, she was actually talking to them. Do you know what? I voted that Ian Paisley shouldn't be thrown out of Parliament because I thought his voice should be heard in Parliament. You have to bring about a peace process by talking to people that you don't agree with. If you just talk amongst your friends, you're not going to get a peace process. You come back home? Is that it? Are you done? You keep poking the man in front of you. Do you want him to speak?
Me again?
Yeah.
What?
Well,
no, you keep poking him. So do you want to speak? Are you trying to speak?
I think this gentleman... but I can do.
Oh, OK. Well...
Actually, yeah, you've talked to these people in the past. You talked earlier on when talking about the nuclear option. Talking is the way you want to go. Yeah. David often says at the end of programmes, telling the public to press a red button. Are you saying you will never, ever, under any circumstances, press a red button?
I think we've discussed this at some length about the aspirations we all have. I do not want to be responsible for the destruction of millions of people, neither do you. Therefore, we have to work for a world where they're not available and not used.
All right, the man with the beard over there, yes.
Just to bring it back to economics, it's all very well for a socialist to stand there with his very nice little red book and say, we're going to fund all these lovely programmes by taking more money from big business, but what's your plan for the economy when those businesses turn around and say, OK, you can keep your high taxes, we'll go elsewhere?
Well, you look at the businesses we're talking about are actually doing very well. They've done extremely well over the past 6 years because their tax have been cut a great deal. I think we have to look at the problems of our public services. We have to look at the issues of what kind of economic future we have. We cannot go on being a low-waged economy, underspending on our public services, investing less than any other industrialised country in our future. I would much prefer that we develop a national investment bank and strategy, regionally based, to improve rail, broadband, road communications, that we improve investment in our industry for the future. We have a lower proportion of manufacturing industry than Germany. We have a lower level of productivity than Germany. We have a lower skill base than Germany. Why is there a difference? Because successive German governments, almost irrespective of which party it is, have been prepared to invest in their infrastructure and their future. I think we should think about that and improve the economy of our own society. And you know what? That would lead to better economic growth. It would lead to better opportunities for everybody. And I think this is an offer that's important, and I think it's time that we actually invested in our future rather than presided over our decline.
But he's saying, if I understood him, he's saying businesses may scarper under the weight of extra taxation. What do you do then?
There's already that issue of uncertainty with Brexit anyway, and we've seen certain companies sort of umming and ahhing and saying, will we stay, will we go?
Well,
if you say to them, well, you're going to pay more tax when you stay here as well,
well
what's their incentive to stay?
Well, actually, the corporation tax level that I'm proposing would actually be less than there is anywhere in the major industrial countries of Western Europe anyway. The crucial thing, and you're right to raise it, has to be gaining tariff-free trade access to the European market as the basis on which they can continue. Because look at it this way. If Airbus are in this country, as they are, they manufacture aircraft parts, they manufacture satellite parts, and the final assembly for the aircraft takes place in Toulouse. Some of the parts are made here, some of the engines are made in other places, some parts are made in Spain. That final assembly takes place. If we don't have that tariff-free access to the European market, are they going to stay? Would they want to stay? Ask yourself that question. You could say the same for many other big manufacturing enterprises. That is why the crucial thing has to be maintaining that economic relationship with Europe outside membership of the European Union. That is the best way of guaranteeing jobs and a growing manufacturing economy in Britain.
Okay,
but it will also have a government that is investing alongside them to improve skill levels and improve communications within this country.
A very brief point from you, so then I will take one last question. Quickly, if you would.
Security earlier.
Yeah.
And a few months ago, you quoted on, you said on television that one of the things you would do if you were successful in coming into government was perform a strategic defence review. Now,
you have to be quick if you would,
they've just gone through a strategic defence review. Why do we need another one?
Okay. Every government that comes into office does a strategic defence review. There are serious issues about the shortage of ships in the Navy. There are serious issues about supplies of frigates. There are serious issues about maritime surveillance aircraft that are not available, that have to be addressed. There's a crucial issue of cyber security and cyber attacks that have taken place on us. And there's a crucial issue about terrorist attacks. And I don't believe you make a society safer by getting rid of 20,000 police officers, as this government has done since 2010.
Right. Hannah Lindsay. Hannah Lindsay, please. Hannah Lindsay. Very quickly, though, Hannah, if you would.
Is it right to scrap university tuition fees as such an immediate priority when there is so much else that needs doing in terms of living quality for so many people in Britain?
And just to say, it's 11 billion it's going to cost, a quarter of your entire spending. Why university fees?
I think we should invest in education for the future, and I do think that abolishing university tuition fees means that any young person has then got the chance to go to university if they can get in. If you look at the process of applications at the moment, number of working class students is dropping, number coming from poorer communities is dropping. I want to see real access for everybody. I think that's the right thing to do. It would not be unusual in many other parts of the world to do this. Listen, as a young person, basically, I had the offer of free education. I didn't take it up. That was my choice, and I'm not complaining about it. I don't think it's up to me and my generation to pull up the ladder on the generations that are coming behind.
Okay,
I want to see an education system that really does work for all, so that every child can develop to their full potential, irrespective of their background and the life chances they were given
Mr.
at
Corbyn,
birth.
I'm sorry, we have to stop you there. Thank you very much indeed.
But I've got so much more to say.
Time's up. So that brings us to the end of this edition of Question Time. Thank you all for coming here to York to put questions to the two party leaders. We are going to be back on Sunday for our second leaders programme. Nicola Sturgeon of the SNP, Tim Farron of the Liberal Democrats. That's at 5 to 6 on BBC One on Sunday. Until then, from York, good night.